Thanks for checking in the Pivoting to Web3 podcast. Go to pivotingtoweb3podcast.com to download and listen, or Web3 Game Plan to check out the videos. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Pivoting to Web3, and today we have something special in the law and legal field. We have Thomas Daley. Thomas Daley is a board-certified family law attorney who practices throughout Texas and beyond, with a dedication to safeguarding what his clients value most: their relationships with their children, their financial stability, and their reputations. Tom combines a razor sharp legal acumen with cutting edge innovation. Before revolutionizing the practice of family law, Tom was a trailblazer in financial technology, crafting proprietary algorithms for high frequency trading that earned him over 20 patents worldwide. Today, he leverages his unique expertise in technology and law to redefine legal landscape, harnessing the power of artificial intelligence to help attorneys deliver better service at lower costs, and is a frequent speaker on the topic to national organizations. Tom loves answering questions about the behind the scenes workings of the legal system and training other attorneys and litigants on how to be more effective advocates. Now, that's why Tom is here, because Tom has a legal field that I found very intriguing on what he's doing today. So I'd like to introduce you to Tom Daley. And Tom, say hello to your audience and ours and let them know exactly who you are and how you really got into this space using AI.
Well, thank you. That was a kind introduction. I'm glad to be here this morning. So, what brought me here was, for me, law was a second career. And my first career was developing software for stock traders, essentially. I worked at brokerage firms, stock exchanges, ran a nationwide consulting firm, and ultimately developed my own software company in 1998 that harnessed some pretty sophisticated algorithms. We would have called some of them AI-based. It's not the same sort of AI that people use today, but it would have been certainly state of the art in 1998. And then I sold that company in 2002. So I know you got a background in the airline industry where everything has to be done exactly once. When somebody makes a plane reservation, we don't have 15 other people typing it back in again and making mistakes with it, and the amount of labor and cost involved in that. And the financial industry works the same way. We call it straight through processing. So you come with that mindset and you think about the efficiencies and the cost savings and the throughput that you can get with that kind of efficiency. And you get into the practice of law, which hasn't changed a lot since the Norman Conquest of about the year 1060. So you're thinking, what in the world happened here? So bringing that, affinity for efficiency and what it can mean to clients and the practice, to the practice of law, has really become my passion.
Well, your passion is definitely what's needed today, but everything and all the changes, there's a lot of concerns about AI and the role of AI in the workforce and financials and security, cybersecurity is just about in everything. So you've done a lot of work in the algorithms, and how does that really play a part? For those of us that don't know, how do those algorithms really play a part in the legal space and with family law and everything that you're doing?
Okay, yeah, that's probably the most important question, is what do they do? What can they do? What should we ask them to do? And what should we not ask them to do? I was talking to a gentleman last night, and he was really emphasizing the human side of the practice of law. And so he kind of got me out of my little techie head, and I started thinking about this human side that he kept pressing on. And I said, you know what? We talk about artificial intelligence all the time, and we should. But we don't talk about artificial judgment because we shouldn't. We still need to have that human in the loop, human judgment, because at the end of the day, the law is about people, and we still need that human judgment. So what can I do for us? So the number one thing I think to look out for with these new language models, these LLMs as we call them, from say ChatGPT or OpenAI or Anthropic or Gemini from Google, is that they're very confident. So if you ask them a question, They will very often, particularly if you don't pose it right, they will give you a very confident answer. And if you don't have the experience or the judgment to know the scope of the usability of that answer, you can be sent down a pretty dark, difficult path. So what are they good for? We know the way they work. What they've done is they've scooped up all the text they can find anywhere on the web, and they've made a map. It's not quite this simple, but they've made a grid basically that says, if I hear these three words in a row, the most likely fourth word is going to be this. And so that's really what the LLMs are doing, is this kind of statistical processing. Every time you ask the LLM a question, you give it what behind the scenes, they call it there's a factor you give it about creativity, a creativity factor. I always use 0 for creativity because we're in law. We don't use creativity. We want the right answer, not an interesting answer. And so in that case, what happens is these three words in a row, what is the most likely fourth word? Pick that one. Whereas if you give it a higher creativity factor, like you might do if you're writing a novel or a bio about yourself, it'll say, well, these three words in a row, these are the 2 or 3 most likely words to follow it, and let's just randomly pick from amongst those. Now we have a new set of words to look for, and so it keeps generating the next part of the answer. So when you're typing in a question, or we call them prompts, to an LLM model, you'll see it's kind of like on a movie where it goes beep 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 beep. The answer just kind of comes out word by word. That's how it's thinking. It's thinking of it word by word. If you say, "What did you just say?" It doesn't know. It's just so. If we know that it's just generating responses based on some sort of statistical probability of what came prior, we know that it's not a source of truth. It's okay. So truth is for Google. Who is the number one podcaster in the United States by audience share amongst 18 to 24-year-old gamers? There is an objectively true answer to that. And an LLM is not designed to give you the objectively truthful answer to that. Google is, or the search engines are. Now, whether they are successful in it or not, that remains to be seen when you do the query. But they're designed for truth. These are designed for creativity at different levels. So, where does that help you? Well, an example of that is I was representing a mom who didn't want her child to spend much time with dad. Dad had some pretty serious mental health issues and had a bad relationship with this girl who was 15 or 16. Children get to an age where you just kind of like, do you really want to fight this wave here? So in Texas, we can ask the judge to interview a child who's 12 years or older, what the child's preferences are. It's not binding on the court, but it is sort of advisory. So he didn't want that to happen because he knew how that was going to go. So what he did was he drafted his own response to it. And again, I said he has mental health issues. I don't think English is his first language. And so what he submitted to the court was just this insane, useless diatribe. So I file an absolutely perfect motion up here that I know is going to get granted. And he files a response down here that calls into question his sanity. And I thought, if he had just gone to ChatGPT and typed in these 3 sentences, would that have been better? So I did. I went in, and one of the first things you always tell an LLM is who it is, right? It's gathered up all the information that's available on the internet. So it adopts whatever persona you want it to. You tell it to become a teenage social media influencer, it's going to respond to you with, yes, girl, let's go. If you tell it you're a Texas litigation attorney, it'll button itself up a little bit, right? So you tell it, you're a Texas litigation attorney representing a mom in a custody battle, or representing a dad in a custody battle. Mom has filed a motion for the child to confer with the court. You don't want that to happen. Draft a response arguing against the interview. That's the 3 sentences. And what it generated was the most coherent, honestly, from my perspective, persuasive argument. I read what it generated. I thought, should I really be doing this? So it wasn't generating truth, but it was generating an argument. And so if he had done that, again, I kind of used my hand gestures here, that if we're performing up here as seasoned professionals with staffs and research experience and training, and the self-represented person is down here, not because they're not as smart, they just don't have access to the tools and the experience, these LLMs can get you to here. They're not going to completely level the playing field. They can narrow the gap. And that gap in the field of law is what we call the judge's discretion to act in an equitable fashion. So when you're this far apart, the judge can't give you what you want because you're not even asking for the right thing, and the judge is constrained by the law. But if you can close that gap, narrow that gap enough, the judge can look at it and say, okay, that's not exactly the right thing, but you're in the ballpark. And now I can exercise my discretion to say, is this right? Is this the right thing to do? And they exercise that equitable discretion. And now you can start prevailing, or at least not losing, on every single issue that comes before the court. So that's a very long response to your question, like what can they do for you? What they can do is level this playing field. They can do that for every single listener that you have. I apply it to law. I saw the other day, I think last month, you were interviewing Mr. Anand, the branding sensei, I think was the
Yes,
title of
brand
the.
sensei.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I listened to that because, of course, branding is something that we all know there's value in branding. But I'm kind of like that pro se litigant. I'm the guy down here on branding. You know, my education and background is in technology and stock trading and law, not in creating the public's mental image of my service offerings, right? Like, what is my brand? And so, and he is. So I listened to that podcast with a lot of interest. And what he kept, I think what he kept saying, and you may have your own takeaway from it, is kind of the same thing. You can use these LLMs to do better than you might do on your own, but it's not the same as hiring Mr. Anand with his Saatchi and Saatchi background and his big brand background.
He
But at
got
least,
some big brand backgrounds. He's there with me or even further. Yeah, I rely on him.
yeah, he's pretty impressive. But one thing he said that I took with me is if you know what you're doing, you can do a lot more with a lot less. And that's the same thing I think with these AI models and helping people who are either self-represented or I think one of the guys, one of the engineers at one of the big AI companies the other day said he thinks they've achieved artificial general intelligence, which is their acronym, AGI, which is their academic way of saying human level of intelligence.
Hmm.
Okay, and which I don't like to get really into semantic battles with people, but I think that we could probably talk for 3 solid days without breathing and not come to an agreement on what intelligence is. But we think we've got an agreed definition of artificial intelligence or general intelligence. So whatever, I think that's, the first brick hasn't been laid yet. We got a wall on top of it. But what he said was, I don't think that our models are better than every human at every task, but I think they're better than most humans at most tasks. And I don't know if that's accurate or not because my use of it is very limited. It's in the field of family law litigation, but I think he may be right there. There's I tell some of our attorneys who don't do a great job of writing emails. Either the emails are a ramble or they may not be the best English that we were taught in 10th grade, or maybe they're a little too acerbic. I don't just paste that email draft into Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever you like, every time before you send it, and tell it you're a Texas family law litigation attorney who speaks in a succinct and direct manner, but is also polite. Redraft the above email. You can almost copy and paste it. Of course, they're all going to start with, I hope this email finds you well. You got to get rid of that sentence. But other than that, they will improve your performance.
Well, at the end of the day, you're absolutely right because AI is really going to enhance who you are. It's going to enhance your intelligence. It's going to bring you to the next level. It's not going to replace you, but it's definitely going to help you, no matter what sector or industry that you're in. But with that said, everyone is using it in different ways and learning how to use it at this point. But in the field of law, should people really be looking at the chat GPTs of the world, putting their case in there, or learning how to utilize it as an argument when they talk to their attorneys? Is that ethical? Is that legal? Is that going to cause a lot of problems? Is there any governance in that area yet? Is it moral, ethical? I guess all of that's my question. Where is
Mm-hmm.
that falling right now in the conversations internally with the governance and justice and the attorneys in the legal field? I guess is my question. What does the conversation look like that we don't know about?
So that's a powerful set of questions because that conversation is going on all up and down from the Supreme Court of Texas. I don't know outside of Texas, all the way down to the individual paralegals working in each firm. And we have 2 things we concern ourselves with: is disclosing confidential client information. So you can go to these LLM models websites and read their privacy policies, but you need to read them every day because they change every day. So the very first thing I did before getting, so I work at a pretty large law firm, but I work in the Plano office. And the first thing I did when I wanted to start having our the attorneys and the paralegals there use the AI, is I had them go through a Coursera course that was sponsored by Google. So it's very Gemini biased, but who cares? But it was about the ethical, responsible use of AI. It didn't teach them anything about statistical models or the math behind it. They don't even know that, right? Any more than I need to know how a spark plug works to get out of town. But and so the two things we learned was, if we're going to take say we have a client document like a settlement offer, and we want to, well, I'll give you a better example. Let's say we have a pleading. Somebody's filed for divorce. What are they asking for? What are they upset about? Well, a quick way to do that, you could just drag that up to one of these LLMs and say, read the document carefully and tell me what the salient issues are in there. And it'll do a pretty good job of that. But it also has everybody's names in it. It's got children's names and children's birth dates and that sort of thing. So the first thing I told them, look, the privacy policies when you visit those websites would lead you to believe that it's safe to do that. But can you imagine what will happen to your reputation and your business if that turns out to be wrong? So the first thing you do is just go in there and do a search and replace and just get rid of the names. Change Tom Daley, to husband or father, and change, the other party's name to wife or mother, and change the kid's name to, thing one, thing two, thing three, because the names of these people isn't important. Their addresses are not important. Their birthdays are not important. It's the legal substance that's important. You don't have to change that. Then drag it up. First lesson then is to protect client confidentiality. The second is that, you cannot trust this thing blindly. It's like having a brilliant associate attorney working for you with zero life experience, kind of a Rain Man type person working for you, right? They've got infinite mental capacity, but no life experience. And so human in the loop is a concept we throw around a lot. Once you have sanitized any data that you're going to send to the LLM so that you protect client confidentiality, ask it your questions, and I teach them how to ask questions in a manner that's designed to get the responses that are useful. Look at it with your own eyes. There's a real famous example, I think it may have been in New York, but I might be wrong about that, of an attorney who went to, I think it was ChatGPT, it was the first one, and he typed in something and it wrote a brief complete with case and statute citations.
But it wasn't real.
Wasn't even real. Wasn't even real. And that was, what was that? That was probably over a year ago, wasn't it?
It was about a year ago that it was really what I call hallucinations, a ghost. And it really, compiled something. When I heard that, you do have to double check your work or at least research it a little bit so you're getting accurate information. That's whether you're in a privacy wall AI or something that's out there in the public. A lot of people are still working in public. I have kind of, gravitated to something with more privacy. But yes, please continue. But that was recent in the last 12 months. It's still recent enough for everybody to take heed.
Well, they should, because I frequently ask the LLMs the same sorts of questions. And like I said, one of the problems with them is they are confident little suckers. So it comes back and I said, I had a question the other day. You think I've been practicing law now because of the second career, I've been practicing law about 17 or 18 years, but you think in 17 or 18 years in a narrow field, I should know maybe not everything, but a whole lot of everything, right? And every once in a while you bump into this real fundamental question. When does property stop accumulating in the marriage? When the judge says from her mouth, you're divorced, from the bench, or when she signs an order? Because that's very often two different dates. So I asked the LLM, like, when did we start accumulating community property in Texas? Texas is a community property state. Upon rendition, that's the oral pronouncement of judgment, or upon entry, which is the signing of the order. And it came back with a confident answer, and it gave me case sites. So, I learned. I swipe the case site. I go to Westlaw. I'm going to look at it myself. Okay, the first case does exist, and it was topically relevant, but it didn't stand for the proposition that it was cited for. Okay. The second case I swiped and looked up was a criminal case. It had nothing to do with when you divide property and divorce in Texas. It had to do with some sort of criminal appeal. I have no idea. It was completely irrelevant. So I typed back, hey, that citation you just gave me above, and I pasted back in because it's still in my copy buffer. Do you really think that stands for the proposition for which you cited it? Churn. No, I'm sorry. It doesn't. I should have checked closer. So that's the second downfall you can have these LLMs. One, they're very confident. So if you just adopt that confidence without checking, you're going to get hurt bad. And the second thing is they don't have feelings, but it feels like they do. Particularly if you're in a transactional world where a lot of the people you deal with don't seem to be very warm and fuzzy. I know that when I'm busy, I can be very transactional. I don't mean to be all the time, but you're trying to move things along, and so then you type into this computer and it says something like, "Oh, that's horrible. Yes, of course I'll help you." Think, "Oh, there's some warmth out there." So it'll be confident when it shouldn't be, and then you'll start to think that that it feels, that it understands, and it really doesn't. Remember, all it's doing is that statistical processing. I heard these three words. What's the most likely fourth word? And I use three as an example. When you see these new models come out, one of the things they brag about is their look back buffers, like how much prior context they can take into consideration. And it's thousands of words now. It can remember a whole lot about you when it answers. You can remember stuff about you from 5 days ago when it answers the next question. But that's the two big downfalls. And we taught them just in that course. We didn't even teach them how to use it, like how to type in a prompt accurately, but it's more like these are things to look for: accuracy and a fake empathy.
So, what do you think is going to happen with the legal field and attorneys in 2025? What trends do you see coming their way?
So the trend I see, and I hope we can get the ethical and appropriateness added to this. What I see is that there are some people being very successful in applying AI to the field of law. And so when you hear that, you hear, "Oh, Tom is using AI to handle incoming discovery requests, doing it very successfully and saving clients money, moving things along quicker. Let me do the same thing."
Well, how does that happen? What do you mean by that? Paint a picture on what that means.
Sure. So what are good tasks for the AI right now? So good tasks are tasks where you can throw a human in the loop and check for ground truth. And I'll give you an example. In the practice of litigation law, certainly in family law, probably in any litigation field, one place where you burn money is in discovery, requesting and obtaining documents you need to help prove your case up. And it can be a disaster. And there's a pace at which that works. Let's say I need a bunch of financial information, and so I send you the requests. And I say, "Donna, on behalf of your client, please provide the following bank statements." And you have 30 days to do it. Well, you wait till 11 p.m. on the 30th day. You're like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give this to Tom at the last possible second. I'm going to dump 2,000 documents on him, and that'll keep him out of my hair for a couple of weeks while he sorts through that. That's a lot of people think that way. I've thought that way. So you dump that 2,000 documents on me. What happens next? So in the traditional path, we pay a paralegal or a clerk to go through those 2,000 documents. Now work with me on the math here. Let's say you pay this clerk or bill this clerk out at, say, $200 an hour. We don't bill them out at that much. It's slightly less, but in your mind, it's easier to multiply something by 200 than 167.50. So anyway, say you're billing them out at $200 an hour. Let's say they're going to take anywhere from 15 to 25 hours billing time to go through those documents, and to come up with that billing time, it may take them a week or two because of other projects. So you got 2 weeks of work and several $1,000s to go through all those documents. That is a classic document classification problem that people have been working on since the 1950s. And so the LLMs can be very useful there when you get a massive documents. And I work with the LLMs through their APIs, with their programming interface, as opposed to typing into the web browser. So I have different safety and firewall capabilities there. And it can do a very good job. You send in a document, you say, "What is this document?" Well, you don't ask it that open-ended, because it'll say, "It's a bank statement." And the next time it'll say, "It's a statement from a bank." And the next time it'll say something similar, but not exactly the same. And you want the labeling to be consistent. So you give a finite list. And you say, "Is this a bank statement, a credit card statement, a retirement statement, a tax return?" You give it a whole bunch of lists of what things are. And then it does that classification. And you'll find probably greater than 90% accuracy in a task like that. And it'll take maybe an hour. And at a hard cost, by the time you pay the LLM's fees for their API, and maybe amortize some EC2, Amazon EC2, or the Microsoft or Google's cloud-based computing costs across that, $50 of hard cost. So that's a great task for an LLM, is classic classification. It can be offloaded, and it addresses an enormously important part of the litigation process in terms of being able to respond quickly. Because now that I can go through documents in an hour, the model's going through documents in an hour.
Mhm.
Within an hour, I can go to lunch, and when I come back, I've got what I call a compliance matrix that shows me everything that they didn't send me. I can send that to the opposing attorney. 2 or 3 hours later, I do human in the loop. We do have somebody go through it to make sure we really didn't get it.
Mhm.
And they're like, okay, so you thought you were going to dump those documents on me and keep me busy for 2 weeks? I'm back at you right after lunch with what you missed out on. So
It's a big difference.
it's a huge difference. And so it gives our clients a little bit of an advantage in the sense that we're able to move the game along at a slightly greater, or maybe even tremendously greater pace. It lowers the cost of servicing the client, which is a benefit to us because we don't have to hire as many people to do. We can do more cases with the same number of people that we have, and the client doesn't have to pay as much. It truly is win, win, win. But that didn't happen overnight. There were months and months of disappointing results of different experiments, different ways of posing the questions and staging the data, and different mixes of technology. You get these, we've all dealt with PDFs. Well, you get a nice downloaded, searchable PDF. Yeah, anybody can figure that one out. Yet clients will take a document and the way they scan it is they hold it sideways with their thumb across the most important part of it and send you a picture of that. And they'll say, hey, what does this mean? And with your own human eyes, you're like, I can't even read that because of the parallax distortion of the fonts. So you need some technology to help you straighten out the text. But it took months and months to pull together just the ancillary technologies to do that. But once you do it, that is an excellent task for it.
Are judges using AI?
Well,
Or can you share what you can?
I don't think as much. There were some really famous, tragic stories of judges using AI in the criminal field. Some of these very large cities, like Los Angeles in particular, is where I remember one horror story. There was this company that said, hey, judges, you know how busy you are all the time. And some of them truly are very, very busy. And the whole concept of justice delayed is justice denied. So they said, you know how you're having to make thousands of bail decisions a week, or maybe hundreds of bail decisions per
Right.
week? What if we could gather data, apply it to our model, and tell you if the defendant in front of you is a likely recidivism risk if they're released back into the community, or whether they're a safe member to send back to the community? Okay, that sounds great, doesn't it? Now we can start being objective, so we don't have the judge's bias in making those decisions. We can make those decisions quickly so people don't rot in jail waiting for a bail decision to be made. And maybe we can keep dangerous people off the street while sending safe people who just had a bad day back to work to take care of their kids and our money. Sounds great. Here's the problem.
Yeah, but wouldn't there be biases in there too?
So that's the problem. And the biases were horrible because here's what happened. Before I tell you what happened, think through how these AI models work. They're statistical processing. They don't know an unreasonable bias from a reasonable bias. For example, if you were to ask an AI model, I'm going to go to war tomorrow, what weapons should I use? Statistically, the answer is stone, axes, and spears, because more wars have been fought and won in human history with those instruments of destruction than anything else. We know that's a good way to lose a war tomorrow is stone, axes, and spears. But it has this bias of 10,000 years of human history where only modern warfare started fighting wars with horses and bullets and things like that and bombs. So now, and you're going to know where this goes as soon as I tell you this next fact, they have this sheet that they filled out about each defendant. And here's some of the questions that are on there: ethnicity and education. Well, we know in the criminal justice system, we ram a lot of people of color and minorities through the system. And if you had a system that rammed a lot of left-handed people through, even though left-handedness isn't what made you create a crime or commit a crime, but you just happen to be left-handed, we would not let left-handed people have bail. We would make adverse bail decisions to left-handed people because more crimes in this database, because of the history of the data, are being committed by left-handed people. But left-handedness had nothing to do with it. So a person's ethnicity had nothing to do with why they committed that crime, but it was a question on there. Their education level probably didn't make them commit that exact crime that day. It may have put them in a place where they had to make tougher decisions than some of us have to make each day about how to put bread on our plates. But the education level didn't make a person commit a crime. But when those factors were in there, The AI doesn't know the difference between a reasonable bias and an unreasonable bias, because we would think a reasonable bias would be this: was the crime committed using a weapon? Well, I think that's a fair one to know. If this person is running around our community brandishing guns, then maybe they should cool their heels in jail for a little while they're waiting for their charges to come up. So that would be a bias, but that would seem like a reasonable bias. Or they've had 6 prior convictions of dangerous, violent behavior in the last 8 months. That would seem like a reasonable bias. This person's got a proclivity for that kind of activity based on his own conduct. But these other things up here led the denial of bail to thousands of people of color and people with lower education and people that came from just certain neighborhoods. And we know that's the wrong outcome. But judges just cranked that through. It became a national embarrassment. And I don't think anybody uses those sorts of systems anymore, at least certainly not judges. I don't know if prosecutors or police forces use them.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious about that, if any judges were really using it at this point in time,
Yeah.
from a
So,
perspective of the law.
so the thing to think through is, what is a judge in our legal system? There was a guy, and I can't tell you his name right now, but he wrote the book Getting to Yes. I think he was a Harvard professor. Skinny little book, really good book to read if you're into skinny but profound books. And he had a TED Talk several years ago. In his TED Talk, he talked about a woman who solved a community problem with her camel. And I don't remember the exact story, but I've morphed his story I use his story this way. In a family law case in particular, there's always at least 3 sides. We always think of 2 sides. There's 3 sides. There's spouse 1, there's spouse 2, or parent 1 and parent 2. But the 3rd side is the surrounding community's interest in predictable and just outcomes. Well, spouse 1 hires me to represent them. Spouse 2 hires you to represent them. Who represents the surrounding community's interest in predictable and just outcomes? The judge. That's the judge's job. And so that's why I say we talk about artificial intelligence, but we should not be talking about, in any positive manner, artificial judgment, because that's where the judge closes the gap. In a place like Texas, we elect our judges. So, there's good and bad with that. But what that means is that the surrounding community here has said, Donna, we want you to have the authority to sit up there and resolve disputes in our community where 2 people can't agree. We can't resolve our own problems. We want you to do it. We want you to do it because we trust your moral compass, your judgment, your direction, your experience. Maybe we want you to do it because you vote the way we do for president. Whatever our reasoning is, we want you to resolve our disputes for us. And so when the judges start using technology as a substitute for judgment, they're thwarting that democratic process and the intent of the judge in the legal system.
So what keeps you up at night with all the AI and all the changes you're seeing? What really keeps you up that you're concerned about going forward into 2025?
So the thing I'll be honest with you, the thing that keeps me up at night is excitement, because I see what's coming and it is going to be big.
I'm sure.
I'm 60, and the field of law is governed by people my age, and which means that you've got people who've been practicing law for 35, 40 years usually by the time they're my age. That's not my case, but it's the case for a lot of them, and they've done well. They've done a fantastic job with thousands of clients over their career, and so this font works. Courier, that always worked in my pleadings. That's what I still use. This works. Why do I want to adopt some of these new technologies? That just sounds like so much hocus pocus. And then
So you don't think it's going to be adopted? Is that what keeps you up at night?
I think it will be, but what I think is the people who could be at the forefront of it aren't. Because when I look at my firm, just in my own office, we've got 3 people who are kind of my age and looking toward retirement and that sort of thing, and have had fantastic careers. But behind us, there is a group of really smart attorneys who need us to be exploring the safe and ethical implementation of these technologies so that as the legal landscape changes, they're not caught off guard. They don't have to make a radical experimental change in their life. Things work fine the way they've been working for the last 1,000 years in terms of doing pleadings right now, but we see the promise of greater efficiency and in some cases even greater accuracy. So if we can start adopting, if you can get people my age and to start adopting these technologies and these promises now, we can be leaders so that when the 40-year-olds come along and they're our age, it was a smooth adoption. The wheel stayed on the car stayed out of the ditch, and everybody made it to their destination safely.
So that sounds like your wish list.
That's the wish list. Thus, my evangelizing about you can do this. You know, you don't have to. Things don't have to be big. You don't have to start big. I have an uncle he's a strange dude, but he is a really smart guy. And I was talking to him about wind generated power one time. I thought I was well briefed on the topic and I was gonna be able to hold my own. Man, he shot past me so quick, I could just kind of shake my head. But we had this conversation. Well, so later on, he sent me a Coke bottle with a little kind of pinwheel on top of it, hooked up to a little electric motor. And if you blew on it, it would make a light come on. And he said, dream big, start small. And that's really the point of my evangelizing here is dream big, but start now and start small.
So that's your message to the legal attorneys. And I got a last question for you. I'm not sure if you're aware because this is more on the blockchain technology side, but there are attorneys that are starting to do smart contracts. How do you feel about that? Are you familiar with the smart contracts and that whole piece? What do you think about that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So, so my research or reading into smart contracts, I see that, say you got an oil and gas contract. That makes sense. You
Right.
pumped what you pumped on the day that you pumped it, and you're entitled to this sort of a payment. That seems like something that, and it's data based, so data can be fed into the smart contract system and can know when to execute the next step, kind of act as an automated escrow agent or payment agent.
Yeah.
In family law, so much of our stuff is like, let's say you have a parent who uses drugs, okay, and I believe in possession schedules, custody plans that always put that parent up at the very top of where they would be if they were a healthy parent, but through phases. And it's up to them to work the phases. A
Right.
lot of them don't, but let's give them this redemption plan so they can get there. Okay. So we'll have things like dad, after a year of clean drug tests, will do an evaluation with Dr. So-and-so. And if Dr. So-and-so believes dad has taken responsibility for his addiction issues and maybe some other things in there, then he'll move to the next level. Well, there's a lot of subjectivity in that, which I don't think is amenable to smart contracts. We do have property division issues. That once I receive this payment from you, you're
Right.
going to receive this piece of property from me. And sometimes we do have to get a mediator to act as kind of an escrow on that. Let's say that my client is supposed to sign a deed conveying a piece of real estate to your client, and your client is supposed to transfer title to something else to me. Well, we don't. I mean, if I know you and we've been doing this together for years and years, you and I will just exchange documents because I know you're not going to hand it over until you've given me what I need. I trust you. But if we have two attorneys who maybe I'm working a case out of New Mexico, it's probably a fantastic attorney over there, but I don't know that person. I want a third party to hold my client's title document so it's
Right.
not released until the escrow agent receives the payment. Just kind of you would do it at any kind of a closing. And I can see that if things like payments and conveyance of real property, well, payments are very automated, but if conveyance of real property was a little more automated, I could see the promise of smart contracts there, and I could also see people learning how to use the AI, the LLMs, to articulate, if you will, the software, so to speak, that goes into a smart contract. So they say it in a manner that is, objective and measurable and actionable.
Thank you so much for that. So I don't want to keep you too long, but my last question is, how can people reach you? And what is it that you haven't shared that's burning in your heart that you want to make sure you get out to the audience?
I appreciate that. So I have a link on the bio page, which gets you to my law firm website and my bio on there, and that is the way, to get a hold of me. That's how my wife gets a hold of me, my mother, and clients and people who are curious and that sort of thing. That's how they get a hold of me. And I tell you that the secret is one of the links I think I gave you was to a site called marriagedocs.store.
Mm-hmm.
And that is nascent. That it's in its infancy. But the idea there is to start taking some really simple legal documents that people frequently get wrong, or they might hire an attorney and pay him several $1,000s to just do kind of this little one-up thing, like
Right.
evicting a boyfriend from your apartment, right?
Right.
You got to go through that process. You really need to hire me to do that? I mean, I'll do it, but there's some paperwork that if you'll file it, that thing's on autopilot. So I'm trying to make some of that stuff available to
Oh, how nice.
people so they can help themselves and help themselves better at a lower cost.
Oh, how exciting. So thank you so much for that. So with that said, I really appreciate having you here. I hope everybody's learned something today from Tom Daly and the legal system. And thank you for really delving into the AI piece and law. So good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. And thank you for sharing and shaping tomorrow together on Pivoting to Web3 podcast.
Thanks for checking in to Pivoting to Web3 podcast. Go to pivotingtoweb3podcast.com to download and listen, or Web3 Game Plan to check out the videos. Thank you.